Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Reinventing Mental Health. Today, we have with us Beth Lambert. Beth and I have run in some circles together for a little while, and we knew each other briefly while we were both in Connecticut. And we have been able to reconnect recently thanks to social media. Beth is an author, educator, and a former healthcare consultant. She has monitored and documented the escalating rates of childhood chronic conditions for over 15 years. Her first book, A Compromised Generation, provides a thorough analysis of the origins of this modern health crisis and documents how modifications to environmental and lifestyle factors can profoundly influence health outcomes, including full disease reversal. Beth is also the co-author of Brain Under Attack, a resource for parents and caregivers of children with PANS, PANDAS, and autoimmune encephalitis. So thank you so much, Beth, for joining us today.
Happy to be with you, Mary.
So tell us what started you on this journey.
I think I got into this the way many people do, which is through my kids. When they were little, they were experiencing a wide variety of symptoms. And it was the kind of thing where I would knock on a lot of conventional medical doors. So we went to an allergist, an immunologist, a dermatologist, psychologist for a variety of, sensory, skin, gut issues. And for every conventional medical door we knocked on, all we really were offered was symptom suppressive pharmaceuticals. And I kept coming back with the question like, well, no, why do they have symptoms? What is, what's the root cause here? And they didn't have any answers for me. So I had the good luck of landing in the office of an integrative physician just by serendipity, and learned that, yes, in fact, you can identify the root causes for chronic health conditions and symptoms, and you can treat them and you can reverse the symptoms. And many times you can reverse the diagnoses. So my kids didn't have any really serious diagnoses, but it was enough to motivate me to look for answers. And I found in a very short time period working with integrative and holistic practitioners that we could reverse it through diet, lifestyle, and, very personalized kind of holistic approaches. And I was so blown away with the empowerment that came from that, being able to identify root causes, being able to make some modifications to how I was living, and seeing such profound changes in my kids. And I also, at that time, I was in grad school, and I was looking at my peers and how my peers seemed to be all having children with issues, but their children were being diagnosed with autoimmune diseases and autism and ADHD. And I just couldn't help but think like something is very wrong here. And it was my mother, who is, a generation above, who said, kids didn't used to be sick. This is not how kids were when I was raising you guys. And that really got me to dig deeper. So I took my graduate school program and did a 180 and said, I'm going to study this. I'm going to understand why kids are having symptoms. And of course, I understood a lot of the factors through my own health journey with my family, but I really wanted to deeply understand it. So I interviewed as many people as I could find, doctors and scientists and parents, to understand what was happening to our kids. But also, the other really important thing that motivated me and continues to motivate me to this day is that I found families who had fully reversed very complex conditions, including things like autism and MS and rheumatoid arthritis and things that I thought were genetic, things that I thought were lifelong. And when I learned that these families had recovered their kids and fully reversed these conditions, I just made it my mission to make that kind of information available to people who don't know that that's even possible. So that's how I got started. That's how I wrote my book. And that's how I started Documenting Hope, which is my nonprofit organization, which is dedicated to finding these answers for families and making these solutions available.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, when I started on this journey because of my son's vaccine injury, one of the conversations that I kept having with people was, when I looked back at when I was in high school, I was in a massive high school. My graduating class had over 5,000 students in it.
Wow.
It was a college campus the size of my school. And then I thought about how many kids did I know when I was in high school inside of this massive population who had chronic illness, diabetes, and then the special ed classroom. Mm-hmm. I can pull out my yearbooks because I have every one of them still. And there's a picture of the special ed classrooms.
Mm-hmm.
And not in one of my schools does that classroom have more than 20 students in it.
Right, right.
Today, we've got almost every student in every classroom requires an IEP or 504 with extra support for health or attention or, autism, whatever the issue is. And that is very abnormal.
Yeah. We're at 1 in 6 kids have some kind of learning disability, and that could include an ADHD, a diagnosis, a learning disability, autism. 1 in 6 kids. And I had a very similar experience. In fact, I wrote an article called What is Causing the Autism Epidemic? And I wrote another one that is titled, What is Autism Really? Because we've sort of come to accept and normalize this epidemic of autism, when what you just described is that people who I think are, kind of over 40 or over 45 go back to their own roots in their elementary school or their high school, and you can't even find kids that had the stereotypical behaviors of autism.
No.
People talk about diagnostic substitution. Well, maybe we called it something else. Maybe we called it intellectual disability or something like that. There's been very good, thorough epidemiological studies done that demonstrate that it cannot be diagnostic substitution. We're not just calling it something different. We have more kids impacted and way more kids. And any of us who have that as our real life experience can relate to that,
Yeah. And so my career actually started in this field when I was 18. My stepmom worked in group homes for adults with disabilities. And I remember the group homes that I worked in. These were not people with autism. These were profound disabilities, most of them in wheelchairs, really severe behavioral disorders, and people who had been very badly abused because of their disabilities. And, that organization had been around for 50 or 60 years. I still know people there. Mm-hmm. And they're saying, when I was there, they got their first person on the autism spectrum disorder. And she was really young. She was like 17 or 18 years old. Mm-hmm. They had to reteach everything because it's a totally different way of interacting and treatment and all of those things when it's typical disabilities and an autism spectrum disorder.
Right, exactly. I had a similar experience in that when I was in middle school, I volunteered at a local community-based organization that sponsored fun events for people with special needs, and people that were recipients of those services had Down syndrome, spina bifida, cerebral palsy, but there was no people in that community that had any of the stereotypical kinds of symptoms of the stimming, the echolalia, the sensory defensiveness, as an example, that are much more characteristic of autism. So we all have that kind of like real world experience. We've just lost touch with that. And I feel like we're really doing a disservice to the families dealing with a child with autism by not acknowledging that it's an epidemic.
Yeah. Well, and so part of the conversation too is like I hear a lot of parents saying, well, you're placing stigma on autism. We're not placing stigma on autism. We're identifying it as what it is. It is a health condition. And that is why we have a health diagnostic code, just like we have a health diagnostic code for diabetes or cancer or lupus or any of these other things. We really do have to treat it the same way. If we can help the symptoms, why would we not do that?
Right, exactly. It's something called diagnostic overshadowing, where if you have the diagnosis, they just sort of dismiss the symptoms and medical or health symptoms as part of that diagnosis. It happens even in Down syndrome, where you have something that is chromosomal, and you can't make changes to the chromosomal situation in Down syndrome, but people dismiss the functional health imbalances in people with Down syndrome because they have Down syndrome. Whereas if you treated them by looking at their imbalances, mitochondrial dysfunction, immune dysregulation, allergies, gut dysbiosis, these things all exist in people with Down syndrome. If you treated those things, they would have a much better quality of life, would be higher functioning, and would feel better. But that doesn't happen because they're like, oh, well, they have Down syndrome. And these things are all secondary to Down syndrome. The same thing happens in autism. We're like, well, they have autism, and people with autism have gut issues and behavioral issues. And know that we can treat those things medically. And we are in 2025 where you have so many amazing diagnostic tests, functional labs that you can take to assess mitochondrial dysfunction, to assess microbiome imbalances, to find out what's going on in terms of inflammatory markers, nutritional deficiencies. We have so many tools at our disposal in terms of technology and knowledge. They're just not being applied because we're stuck in the old paradigm that autism is genetic. And it is not. It is partly genes, partly environment. A focus on medical issues would get us into an entirely different situation with everybody who has that diagnosis.
Yeah. And so the phrase that I hear frequently in the field of like epigenetics and in the functional healing communities is genetics load the gun, but diet and environment pull the trigger. And that's such a huge part of this conversation.
Right, exactly. And there's actually, and genetics can be incredibly valuable. You can find out specific things about your genetics and make modifications. Like, are you a poor detoxifier? Well, let's support you with certain nutrients that help you detoxify. Or maybe you don't utilize vitamin D the way everybody else does. How can we support that by getting you more sunlight? You know, things like this that are personalized medicine. That's what genomics really offers for us.
And actually, in our counseling practice, we actually do that. We do MaxGen, and we use the Works panel because when we have kids coming into our office and they're 3 years old and they've got anxiety through the roof, what 3-year-old like that? What do they have to be anxious about? They're 3,
right?
You know,
exactly.
So I love using those reports because we can say, okay, based off of your genes, this is your roadmap for the rest of your life. We know that you're going to have difficulties here if we don't support this. We can change this part of your diet. We can make sure you're getting more sunlight. Like, we can take all of these steps.
Right. Exactly. And that's the future of medicine, is personalized. It's just that our system has not caught up with that. And also, if you think about what our system is designed to support, it's 5 minutes with a practitioner that's reimbursable by insurance. And if you don't fit into those criteria, you can't access care. So the type of interaction that's required between a patient and a practitioner in this personalized medicine environment is time. You need to ask questions. You need a detailed medical history. You need some of that testing that can be helpful to personalize care. So we don't have a system that's set up to support that.
And, part of that is related to the healthcare system and insurance, right? As a provider that does accept insurance for counseling services, we are constantly having to battle with insurance companies over what are we allowed to do? How much can we bill for it? How much time can we spend with this person? When people step outside of the traditional healthcare system and they're working with health coaches and functional doctors and, naturopaths and nutritionists, you can't use your insurance for that, but you are seeing such a massive improvement in your health and well-being.
Well, that's why what we do at Documenting Hope is often find the areas of someone's life that they have control over, things that they can do without needing a doctor or certain kinds of therapeutic services. So we teach parents, for instance, about how to reduce the total load of environmental toxins in your home that adds additional stress to the body. How do you help support a healthy microbiome through diet and nutrition? How do you help your body become as resilient as possible through time in nature, through mindfulness and stress management techniques? I mean, there's so many things. They sound like they're not. Like, really, does mindfulness help? Come on, I have a child with severe autism. How's mindfulness going to help? It isn't just like that. It's not one particular strategy. It's really thinking about how we live our lives in the modern world and trying to kind of unwind some of the modern stressors and some of the practices and habits that we have that are just unhealthy for human bodies. And there's so much that people can do on that front. And then when you get into more complex conditions, you can really benefit from working with a practitioner who has additional tools, whether that's laboratory diagnostics, nutritional supplementation, or genomics, or whatever. And we need to get to the place where maybe that we have a system that supports that. But in the meantime, parents need to know that there's so much they can do on their own to get started, because so much of it is about what we're doing every day in our homes.
So what are some things inside of the home that parents should be looking at?
So I think that, if you put it into the context of understanding that our bodies are expressing symptoms because they're out of balance, because something is dysregulated. Something is, for instance, you could have your microbiome as an example. I talk a lot about the microbiome. You could have through some antibiotics or chemicals or other exposures in your life, create a situation where the microbes in your gastrointestinal tract are not as diversified as they should be. They really need to be kind of like a healthy ecological system, robust, diverse, many different kinds. So that's the seat of our health. Our microbiome, our gastrointestinal tract is the seat of our health. So there's so many things that you can do through food, and everything that you do every day. You eat 3 meals a day, and you can influence your microbiome positively or negatively each time you open your mouth and you put food in there. You can influence your microbiome by deciding whether or not to filter chlorinated water. You can, and also reduce the toxic burden from chlorine and fluoride and other kinds of toxins that are in water. You can influence your overall cellular health and the burden on your immune system by eliminating as many synthetic toxic chemicals that are in most of our homes. I mean, we live in this place where it is very normal to go to Target or to go to Walmart or order on Amazon and get our soaps, our shampoos, our cleaning products, our plastic baggies, our plastic containers. This is just how the modern American lives. And the problem with that is most of these products, these consumer products that are readily available, that we use every single day, that we've been acclimated to as normal, most of them contain toxic chemicals that are carcinogens, endocrine disruptors. They might impact and cause birth defects. I mean, these things are everywhere. There's 80,000 chemicals, more than 80,000 chemicals that are currently on the market that have never been tested for human safety. So what we can do in the home is try and minimize our exposure to synthetics as much as possible. So that's in furniture, personal care products, in your cleaning products. It's pretty much everything. So, how does the average person sort through that and know what's toxic and what's not? The basic rule of thumb is you try to get as close to nature as possible. So if you're choosing 2 soaps, and one is Castile soap made basically from, coconuts, and the other one is synthetic petrochemical-based soap that's got 75 ingredients and you don't know what they are, you just read the label and then you make a choice that's as simple as possible. So I think it comes down to really starting to pay attention to the very little choices we make every single day and trying to do things that are just more in alignment with nature, whether the products we use or our daily practices. Like, I think as in the modern world, we've become so accustomed to staying up late because we can. We have lights, electricity, we have these devices that keep us entertained, we got lots of stuff to do in the evening. But human beings developed over millennia just going to bed when it's dark. Like, we went to bed and we slept and our bodies repaired. And when we slept, like, that's what sleep is partly for. So we don't do that anymore. And we just kind of have to think, all right, our bodies are not adapted to the way that modern humans live. Can we get our bodies back into daily routines that are more similar to how our ancestors lived? Because our bodies will be healthier for it.
Absolutely. So, we talk to parents frequently about making sure that within the first 30 minutes of waking up, you're going outside. You don't have to be doing anything super duper physical. Go out on the back porch with your kids and drink your cup of coffee, let them run around. No sunglasses, no hats shading their eyes so that the sun hits the cone. And we are stimulating all of the wonderful natural processes that our brain and our body were made to do.
Exactly. It's so simple, right? Like you just described, a very simple thing. And I think because of its simplicity, people don't believe that actually matters. But there is very rigorous science behind regulating your circadian rhythm, like what touching the ground actually does with your bare feet. Like, it sounds like that can't possibly be healing, but there is really good science behind it. And it is, just because it's simple doesn't mean it isn't powerful.
Exactly. And so when I'm working with a client that comes in and their sleep is their biggest struggle, I'm like, okay, well, we don't actually have to do anything. I'm just going to send you camping. Like, I want you to go into the woods for a week and live by nature. Wake up when the sun comes up, go to sleep when the sun goes down, and you'll see that you can naturally get back to your natural circadian rhythm. I don't need any medication. It doesn't cost anything except for a campsite.
Yeah, that's just really good advice, because sometimes people don't believe it until it's experiential, until you've experienced it. So if you force yourself to do something like that and experience it, then you learn, and you're like, okay, I'll turn the lights down in the evening now. Okay, I'll turn the device off.
Well, and so even inside of your house, like the white lights, they feed parts of your brain that we don't want being fed in the evening, that stimulate us and keep us awake. But you can do simple things like replace those bulbs with red light bulbs, which, you know, when somebody first said that to me, I was like, yeah, that's like creepy. Like the house looks so weird.
It's creepy until everyone's doing it, and then it's normal.
Right. So we started replacing bulbs one at a time in lamps. And we have red light bulbs in every single one of our lamps. At least one of the bulbs has been replaced with red, and it's the only one that we turn on after dark.
I love that. That's so great. I mean, you can do that, and you can even just turning your lights down, you know, or replacing with incandescent rather than LEDs, and these little things that you can do. Well, of course, red lights is great. Like that's perfect. It makes it feel like it's campfire time. But, you know, like I do feel like people are more and more waking up to these kinds of little hacks that you can do. You can live in the modern, you don't have to be camping. You don't have to live in the woods. That would be great for your health, but you can live in the modern world, in our modern context, and just make little tweaks like that.
Yeah. So, when you're working with families, I know we have to tell them, no, I'm not telling you to go home and empty out your entire pantry. Like that's not realistic. What are some common single step changes that you tell people to do when it comes to food? Because that's a big area for us with so many foods being so hyper processed.
Yeah, I mean, I would say there's two things that I would typically give as advice for people to start. One would be identify foods that are likely inflammatory for your child. So for some people, it's so common you hear about gluten and dairy as a problem for people. Why? Because they're probably the most common foods that we eat as a society. And what happens when you have an imbalanced body is you develop a leaky gut and you develop a sensitivity to things. So every time you eat these foods, you get inflammation in your body, and then your body uses up resources to deal with the inflammation, and then becomes a vicious cycle. So you can give your body a break by identifying some of those inflammatory foods. You know, the number one inflammatory food, and I think the easiest to take out and reduce the inflammation is sugar, refined sugars. Now, it isn't easy because it's addictive. It's easy because it's like, we know it's inflammatory for everybody. You know, like you don't need to worry about bioindividuality there. Like most people are having an inflammatory response to sugar, and that can create blood sugar imbalances that can cause inflammation, and it's a problem for pretty much everyone. So starting with that, even just saying, okay, let's start by moving to natural sugars. Can we do that? And then slowly trying to take some of that sugar and inflammatory burden out. The other thing that I say for people in terms of like the one thing that you can do, I love this with kids too, is try to explain to kids that when you're eating food, you're not just feeding yourself, you're actually feeding a colony of trillions of microbes. And they're in your gut. And they have certain foods that they need to be healthy. And high fiber foods, a diversity of foods is what is important to keep that microbiome and all those microbes healthy. And for kids, like when my kids were little, I would tell them, like, you have to eat all those foods because it's nutritious for you, but don't forget to feed the pets in your belly, because that is an important part of keeping us healthy. They need a diversity of foods. So for my kids, we would do like challenges to see how many different types of fibrous fruits and vegetables we could get in a day, just for the diversity of it. And we almost made it like a challenge. So I like to share with parents that, you know, you make it a game and you let them know about the bugs in their gut. And, you know, you can kind of make it a little more fun, and it's less about deprivation, like, oh, you can't have those crackers or those cookies or those cakes. It's more about the challenge of how do we find and find the things that the pets in our belly like to eat, and make it fun.
So how do you handle that with kids that are like OCD germaphobes, especially like pans and pandas?
Well, I mean, I think that there's cases where you might need a little more help with that. So, you know, one of the things with like pans and pandas and OCD, that can be really complex, and you might have things that are contributing to that, like zinc deficiencies or brain inflammation that's precipitating that. So that takes a lot more work, and that's telling your kid with pandas and OCD that they need to feed the gut bugs isn't going to do it. So that takes more of a medical management. So I mentioned zinc as one example. Low zinc is oftentimes associated with anorexia, anxiety, the OCD symptoms. So zinc and copper need to be in balance. So sometimes that's like a little example of a hack and a one step people can take towards trying to overcome those OCD symptoms or those anxiety symptoms. Essential fatty acids are another one. If you can get certain supplements in, sometimes that moves them away from those behaviors. Cognitive behavioral therapy can be helpful for overcoming those kinds of things too. And there's no one way to do it. Every child's bio-individual. So I think for those kinds of cases, that's a longer term play, and you have to work on what's the greatest imbalance right now, and what can I actively, get to help my child progress towards a more balanced state. And there's other tools that are available too for those symptoms of like OCD and PANS and PANDAS, anti-inflammatory kinds of therapeutics you can do. But it's definitely a little more challenging, and having a practitioner who's used to that is a lot easier than trying to go that on your own.
Yeah. So parents, when it comes to kids that have OCD or they are germaphobes, having that conversation with a practitioner is most helpful, just to make sure that we don't, flare currently another OCD. So when you're talking about body care products, because skin is actually our largest organ, we absorb everything that we put onto our skin and anything that's flowing over us, including shower water. What are some products that you really, really like and recommend families move over to instead of these overly commercial products?
I think for, the personal care products, there's very simple things. I mentioned before, like Castile soap. Yep. You can use that for everything. You can use that for soap, shampoo, as a cleaning detergent. It's very safe. I think that there are many more companies that produce non-toxic products now than ever before that are, like toothpaste, for instance. There's a couple different brands of toothpaste that don't have fluoride, that are made from all natural ingredients, like Revitin or Lumino. There's like lots of different brands. So I think it's a matter of if you have to have like a product and you're not willing, for instance, like let's say you don't want to go to the baking soda and vinegar on your cleaning products. A lot of people will do baking soda and vinegar for their cleaning products because they're reasonably effective, they're inexpensive, and they're completely non-toxic. But sometimes people are like, yeah, but I want a spray bottle and I want it to smell good. There's that sort of those emotional attachments we have to products. There are so many products out there that can replace the toxic ones. So for instance, there's a company called Branch Basics that has non-toxic cleaning products, reasonably inexpensive. You can actually, I think, even get it some Target and some other kinds of large big box stores now. So you can find the replacements. And I often tell people to check out an organization. First of all, there's two that you can sort of there's several, but the two that I like that you can vet various products. One is EWG, Environmental Working Group, and they have a skin deep database where you can go in and see what is in the products, and they rank them from 1 to 10, 1 being the safest, 10 being the most dangerous in terms of toxic exposure. So let's say you have a shampoo you really like and you want to see if it's toxic, you can just type it in and they will show you what the chemicals are in that product, how dangerous it is relatively. So that's a great resource. And then there's another one that used to be called Made Safe, which is a certification process. I think we now have a new label called Made Wise. And they are vetting products to make sure there's nothing toxic in those products. So you can go on and they've certified not just personal care products, but they've also certified household goods like mattresses and bedding and things like that, and cosmetics. So those are a couple good resources. If you still want a product, you're not, again, going to use baking soda, vinegar, or lemon juice, all those wonderful things that nature provides, there are still commercial products you can get that are safe.
Absolutely. And there's also apps for those families that want to do this in the grocery store. I like Think Dirty for all your body care products. Mm-hmm. So you can scan them and they do the same thing. They give you a score and then they tell you what are the risks of using this product.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, there's an app for that now, right?
Yeah. And I find that one really helpful with kids. Like we have a class that we've done where we take kids to the grocery store with their parents and have them start looking at some of the products that they're using,
Yeah.
whether it's those body care products or even foods. And when kids start realizing, oh my goodness, this is not something that anybody should be using because it can cause cancer. Well, that's when you really start to see changes happening in the house, because if kids can get on board with it and they understand the why, there's a lot more in that conversation for the family to have.
Yeah, for sure. And having sort of a digital tool that they can use is that's just their digital native. So that's kind of their language.
So one of my favorite ones of those that we ever did is we took this group, and I think we had like 5 families. And I told the kids, go and pick up the most common things that you guys purchase every week to eat. And they all came back with products and they're scanning stuff. And this one kid looked at his mom and he was like, we're never buying this again. And his mom was like, what are you talking about? We eat that at least once a week. And he's like, Mom, this app says this causes cancer and it mutates your genes.
So good. Give the kids the tools, and they're no dummies. They're smart.
Yep.
That's amazing.
But most people don't realize, like, they assume that because it's in the grocery store, it has to be something that's safe.
Right. Right. Our regulatory bodies are supposed to, in theory, protect us from some of the toxic stuff making it onto the shelves, but they don't really have the capacity to. And and there's also corporate capture where, things are green light that shouldn't have been green light on the shelves. So we have to be our own advocates. And again, like, you can use an app or you can use a database or you can read ingredients, but at the end of the day, if you feel overwhelmed by all that, just look at the labels and see if it's as close to nature. Can you identify? Do you know what shea butter is? Do you know what coconut is? Or are you not able to even say the chemical word that is on the label? And then that's your telltale right there. Like, you shouldn't put that in the cart.
Yeah, if you can't say it, you probably shouldn't be using it.
Right. Yep. Exactly.
Okay, so are there ways that you feel parents can get more involved in affecting change inside of, like, the grocery store?
That's a great question. So I think there's a couple ways that people can facilitate change. One is, so let's take the grocery store, for example. You can actually, if you've identified products that you like, but they're not at the grocery store, you can talk to the produce manager or the dairy manager or the purchaser people do this all the time. They're like, I really wanted this fermented drink that you can order from this company in California. Can you get it on your purchase? And people get things showing up on shelves all the time. I've even seen this, even though it's a major corporation, I've even seen this happen at Whole Foods, where people ask for something and they can get it on the shelf. So that's like one way you could do that. And on the flip side of that, let's say that Whole Foods, for instance, is doing something unsavory that you don't like. For instance, there was the announcement that a lot of produce would be covered with this resin called Appeal.
Oh, yeah.
So things like avocado would be first treated with a treatment called Appeal, which would help promote shelf life. And they said it's safe, but we don't really know. Did they do double-blind, placebo-controlled, randomized trials on animals and humans to determine whether it's safe? There's a whole category of things that are classified by the government as GRAS, or generally recognized as safe, GRAS, which is kind of a pass because they don't do the research on it to see whether it's safe. In any case, I'd rather have my avocados and apples and whatever else without a film on the outside to extend shelf life. Like, how gross is that? I want produce. Produce rots. Like, you don't.
It's supposed to. Yeah.
So if you see that's coming up and you see that label on your avocado, you call up the produce manager at your grocery store and say, I will not buy this. Get rid of this. I mean, and I think the other piece of this is doing this in numbers. I've always said to parents, if you can find any other parents in your community who kind of see eye to eye, even if like a little bit, like another parent who likes to eat organic food, another parent who tries to minimize toxins in the environment, and you kind of band together and you take actions together, it's much more powerful than trying to do anything on your own. Oh, and by the way, if you can get your kids and their kids to hang out together, it feels more normal to your kids. Like, and you're not just the crazy mom who won't allow them to have, toxic cereal or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, finding community inside of this is sometimes really difficult for families. And, we're really blessed in Texas. There's huge homeschool communities of families that are living very holistic lives. But we definitely hear from some clients, that is a bit harder for them.
Oh, for sure. And, and it's not in every community that has that locally. And so sometimes you need to find those communities online. There are Facebook groups that people find where you feel less alone and you make it feel more normal for yourselves. We created an online community called Healing Together, which invites people from all over the world. Actually, we have some members from South Africa and Chile and France and all different places who have made a commitment to try and work on their child's health and healing. And they join this community, and we have these live calls. We have live calls with integrative physicians and health coaches. And when people come onto these calls, you're just talking to your people and you're all sharing your knowledge about, healthy living and what it takes to heal. And it feels normal. You all of a sudden go from feeling like on an island, like I'm the only one that doesn't take pharmaceuticals, to, oh no, I would never take pharmaceuticals, and neither would any of the people that I know. Do you know what I mean? It just feels more normal.
Absolutely. Okay, well, so for anybody that wants to reach out to you and they want to know more about what it is that you're doing with Documenting Hope, how would they do that?
You can email me at beth@documentinghope.com. That's a way to reach me directly. But you can also go to documentinghope.com and you can learn about the work that we do. We have free articles, free newsletters, practitioner directory. We train health coaches and we run research studies. And we're actually going to be opening some of our research later this year. We are enrolling 12 families who have a child with autism into a research study helping test a model of care that will hopefully reverse symptoms and possibly even diagnoses in autism. So if you are interested in learning more about that, you can go to the website, documentinghope.com, scroll down to the bottom, and there's a place for you to enter your email. And then you can stay up to date on both our free webinars and our research opportunities.
Very cool. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Beth. I appreciate your time. I know that you are a very busy lady with all of the things that you're doing. And thank you for our viewers for joining us. Please make sure you like, share, and subscribe so you know when our next video is available.